Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Alp Chess. I'm Alan,
I'm Ali.
and for the first episode of our channel, we have decided to open up with the Immortal Game itself by Adolf Anderssen versus Kieseritzky. This was a game played in the 19th century, over 150 years ago, but it was the original Immortal Game. It's a very beautiful game. When we first watched it, as we were, studying chess in the beginning of our chess careers, we both really liked it, and I think you guys will love it as well. And let's get started. So Anderssen is white, and he opens up with e4. Black answers with e5, and then we have f4, the king's gambit. This is not really so popular nowadays because it leads to some very sharp positions, and then white sacrifices a pawn. But it used to be very popular back in the 19th century when the whole game was all about the attack. In this game, black decided to accept, and we go into the king's gambit accepted. But I was talking with Andy before the game, and he was saying how his favorite option nowadays is not to accept the sacrifice, but to go in some different lines. So Andy, which lines are your preferred lines in this opening?
Uh, I would I almost always play d5 in this position, but I also like to develop another piece before doing anything else. So that's my approach to this type of
Yeah,
opening.
yeah, that's a
Like
good
or knight c6, or
right,
just d5 immediately.
or just d5 immediately. Yeah, this is a good approach, more modern approach, because you get to develop your pieces, and as we'll see, by accepting this pawn, black loses in development. But okay, accepting it is also a way. It's an older way to play this. And then Anderssen goes into a sideline of the king's gambit with bishop c4, the bishop's gambit. Generally, knight f3 here is uh, is more of a main line because it prevents the queen from coming here. But white is saying I don't care about the queen coming there with check, which is what black did. And this prevents white from castling, but this queen will become a target later on, as we'll see in the game. And I think this is why you were telling me, Andy, that in this you probably wouldn't even reach this position because you really don't like the queen being on the side of the board like this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So from here, black plays b5, trying to divert the bishop from the center of the board. But again, as Andy was saying in the beginning, black needs to develop one of his pieces. This kind of diversion doesn't really work out too well for black. Um, he starts by developing knight f6. However, even though this is a development, it turns out that probably developing the other knight or maybe the bishop in this position would have been better because this cuts back the retreat of the queen. And now the queen will be bullied around a little bit. So first, knight f3, developing with tempo, attacks the queen. The queen retreats. And d3, opening up this bishop's diagonal and pinning this pawn. So now black again ignores another idea in the opening, which is don't move the same piece twice. An ideal way here would be to develop either with the bishop somewhere or with the knight. But instead, he moves the knight, which has already been developed. He shouldn't have moved it twice. He does this with the idea, of course, of forking the king and the rook. And and of course, white cannot take because then the queen takes the rook. But this is a one move threat, and white can easily defend against this, which is what Anderssen did with knight h4. Then black plays queen g5, attacking both the knight and the bishop. So white defends both by playing knight f5. And here, black attacks the bishop. Again, losing more time. He really should have developed one of his pieces here. And the other problem with playing this move is that now both of these squares, which are usually squares where the bishop or the knight can develop, are actually blocked. So the black's pieces on the queen side can't really develop. So here's the first real sacrifice of the game. Anderssen says, you know what? Black hasn't really developed a lot of his pieces yet. I have a lead in development, and I don't really need this bishop on b5. So I'm gonna give it up, and instead I'm gonna get more activity from my pieces. So he starts with g4, attacking the knight. The knight retreats to f6, and now black is attacking this pawn twice. So white defends it with rook g1. And now the bishop is hanging, so black just decides to go ahead and take it. Um, yeah. Then here, white continues with his plan. H4 attacks the queen, only one place for the queen to go. And now h5, again, only one place for the queen to go. Now queen f3. So as you can see, white has advanced on the king side. He has gained space and has developed his rook and his queen, and now he is threatening bishop takes f4. And there's no way to defend this, and that would trap the queen. So black needs to make some room for the queen to escape, and the only way to do this is to move the knight back. So he does. Knight g8, bishop takes f4, and queen f6. So although black has escaped with his queen without his queen getting trapped, look at his pieces. I think this is one of those few games. You don't usually get to see games like this anymore, where all of black's pieces, except for the queen, are on their original squares. So it's almost as if white had gotten all these moves, all these developing moves for free. And even though he has given up a bishop, he has a huge lead in development, huge control of the center, and this is just a great position for white. So he completes his development with knight c3, and now black decides to finally develop one of his pieces with bishop c4. So on the other, I don't know about you, but like when I see a position like this with all of white's pieces developed and black's pieces not really doing much, I think that even though I can't see the win yet, I have a feeling that this position would be much better for white.
Yeah. Intuitively, I mean.
Yeah. So black's attacking the rook, but white has such a lead in development that he decides, you know what, I can afford to give up the rook, and I just want to continue with the attack, and that's what he does. Knight d5 attacking the queen. Now the queen takes the b2 pawn and attacks the other rook. So now we have black counterattacking in some ways, but we have all of white's pieces starting to get very close to black's king. And here Anderssen plays a move that is kind of a genius move by human standards, even though the computer has found some ways to refute it. The idea behind bishop d6 is that he wants to get the bishop right in front of the king so that it cuts the retreat squares of the king, and also eventually wants to play e5 to block the retreat of the queen along this diagonal, so the queen can no longer contribute to the defense. So what does black do here? There are many ways to play. The computer move is to simply to take one of the rooks and then not go ahead and take the other rook, but to retreat with the queen, so to try to check the white king, and black should be able to survive here. Although the position still looks very dangerous. Maybe a computer can defend this, but I think in practical terms, I don't think there's any human that can defend this position. But instead, Kieseritzky decides to accept the rooks. So first, he takes the g1 rook. Then white closes the diagonal, as we said, and then he takes the other rook with check. So now we have king e2. And now, according to the computer, there is this bishop a6 move, which allows black to survive a little bit longer. We will look into it in a second. But the game finished much quicker after black played knight a6, and then we have checkmate in 3 with knight takes g7 check, only one move, queen f6 check, sacrificing the queen, knight takes f6, and then finally ending it with bishop e7 checkmate. And this is a very beautiful final position. I don't know what your impression was when you first saw this, Ando, but I was very impressed when I first saw this. Sacrificing a minor piece, the queen and both rooks, to checkmate the opposing king with just two knights and a bishop in the middle game.
Yeah, it's like that's why we like chess.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back though, here black could have offered a little bit more resistance by going here, but white is still winning after a move like knight c7, and black would have to go back, and then you capture this bishop. This rook is falling. The black king can't really escape anywhere. The back rank is very dangerous. Basically, black would have to retreat with the queen and then sacrifice the queen back, and white would still have an overwhelming attack. But I mean, the way the game went was a much prettier end to the game, with an actual checkmate instead of with material advantage. So that's the Immortal Game by Adolf Anderssen, and this is the first video of our channel, Alp Chess. If you liked what you saw, leave a comment and hit that subscribe button. You can leave a comment about any other games you want us to cover next. They can be Grandmaster games, or they can be the games that you guys have played, and we will analyze them and see what improvements could be made. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. See you guys next time.
Bye.